afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's session. I would like to kick us off by introducing Jeanne Contardo to start the conversation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Thursday. I am delighted to have you here today. My name is Jeanne Contardo. I'm Vice President and Managing Director of the Capital CoLAB at the Greater Washington Partnership. And I am joined today by President Michael Rao from VCU. This is the kickoff, the final culminating event of our credential month. So we have spent all April engaging in events with our employers, with our university partners, and with all of you students, trying to make sure that you are getting the resources that you need in order to fully maximize your digital tech credential. So when we thought about how should we really put the cherry on top, we couldn't imagine a better institution and a better leader to feature than Michael Rao from VCU. So did want to spend, if you will humor me, just a minute reminding all of you the digital tech credential is focused on helping employers, students, and universities connect all the dots and enter the workforce in a meaningful way. This is intended to be a conversation today. So do know that I'm going to introduce President Rao in a little bit. I'll read through some of his amazing bio. And first, I'm going to ask you to tell us who you are, because we want to know who you are. We want to know where you're from. So if you will, in the chat, go ahead. You don't have to share your name unless you want to, but definitely share your university that you're from, because we know we had students from all over the region that were actually registered for this webinar. So our region with the Greater Washington Partnership and the Capital CoLAB spans the footprint from Baltimore all the way down to Richmond. So we are Thomas Levine. Now I have to say, Thomas Levine, you do get a shout out from us because you are one of our primary champions, active on social, super engaged, and one of our first digital tech credential students. So I just have to say, good to see you. And per usual, the first person to weigh in. Thank you, everyone. Keep letting us know where you're from. This is lovely. Very happy to see you. So now we're going to get into the conversation with President Rao. So you all, if you're from VCU, know a little bit about President Rao. For those of you who may not be, I'm going to give you just a thumbnail sketch and then we'll get into it. So President Rao became the 5th president of VCU and the health system in 2009. So this, in a higher education landscape, is just an incredible tenure of leadership. And I'm really delighted to be able to hear more about his experience at VCU and prior. Because the other piece that I think is important is that when he first became a college president, not at VCU, he was the youngest college president in the country. And so what that tells me, one, is that I need to achieve more in the course of my life, because perhaps I need to be better. But the other is that President Rao has really made some incredible choices along the trajectory of his career. And I think we can learn a little something about what priorities should shape our choices and how we should think about that generally as we're moving forward. So President Rao, thank you so much for being here today. And to start with this conversation, and again, feel free throughout this conversation, folks will have a Q&A session at the end, but we also welcome you to just chat your questions throughout and we'll try and get to them. If you can just start by telling us a little bit about your story. So as a college president, as a university president, I know you're asked to reflect on that periodically. We have a lot of students on this webinar today who are just beginning their professional journeys. Will you tell us a little bit about your path?
Yeah, sure. And I don't know how far you'd like me to go back, but I will say, Jeanne, first, thank you. This is a real honor for VCU and me, as well as all of our students. And I think we have some members of our faculty who are also joining in here. And it's delightful that VCU is a really integral part of the Greater Washington Partnership. This is a very important undertaking and VCU needs to be a part of it because that whole corridor is really very connected. And if you look at the most successful regions in our country, they really connect key portions of their communities, and Richmond is obviously an important one, along with Northern Virginia. So we're delighted to be a part of this. And thank you for your leadership and including us in CoLAB and giving us the chance to really be front runners, candidly, in the digital technology, digital literacy project work that we've done. So I don't know how far you want us to go back, but I will say that, you know, your professional journey is really only a part of who you are, and that your life journey, which is sort of the whole thing, it really influences your professional journey. And as you get deeper into your career, you realize that, who you are as a professional is also a reflection of where you came from. So I was thinking about this question because it is asked occasionally. And, what occurred to me is that it probably was a factor that, I had a dad who was an immigrant. He was the first to go to college in his family, and he actually became a physician. He became a doctor. And then he finished a really impressive residency. And at 30 years old, he had Hodgkin's lymphoma and he died. So not a great story for him, but and challenging for us. But, I had a mother who was at the time 23. I was 4 years old. I largely grew up in a small isolated town of about 400 people with mostly elderly people, which was a huge benefit to me. I learned a lot from them. They used to frequently say, don't wait to get to be our age before you really know what matters. And that sets with me. And I think about that every day. I'm very grateful to my grandparents and my aunt for everything that they did to really play a role in raising me. And the one thing that they did, and my mother did frequently too, is they would say, because I had a lot of self-doubt given the circumstances that we were in, we didn't have much in the way of resources. They'd say, we don't have much, but Michael, you're smart. You can do anything. And that made a huge difference for me because they said it so much that it just pounded into, who I am today. And so I was candidly, Jeannie, I was driven to leave that small town. I wanted to see more of what I saw the world could be on TV. And that's the truth. That was about all I saw of a lot of the world. And I remember thinking to myself, I hope I can see those palm trees. And remember, I grew up in Florida, but our town had no palm trees. And so, it was a really, really, a strong motivator for me, to be candid with you. Very few people in the town I grew up in, had gone to college, and many had not finished high school. So it was just a reality of where I was. But they were really nice people and good to me, and I'm grateful to them. And they all sort of propelled me. But my high school was a really great experience because I had teachers who loved the fact that I was interested in learning what they wanted to teach, because there were a lot of kids in my town who were not real interested. So I loved college, and I guess I can say at this point, I loved it so much that I stayed. And, half of my job now is healthcare, and healthcare, of course, is my own area where I serve as a professor, although I don't get too much time to do that because I'm always wrapped up in, trying to push the vision that I have forward, but also in a lot of issues like vaccinations and all of those things that we really have to tend to. But in any case, that's a little bit of my background. And I will just say a lot of people were really good to me, gave me a chance, including people in California, where I ended up for a while, Montana, Michigan. They just believed in me because I had energy. And that's what I see in a lot of our students today, the next greatest generation of Americans. They're driven. They want to make a difference. And many of you, like me, are sort of first generation or close to it. My dad was first generation, but he died early. My mother really didn't do college. So I became first generation. And that's what I see in a lot of our students. And I'm really proud of them for helping to shape this country into what it's becoming very rapidly.
Well, I thank you for sharing that story. And when you understand where someone comes from and how far they've made it in their career, I think it helps tell that personal narrative. And so as students are just beginning to embark on their professional journeys and imagining how to tell that personal narrative and pull the pieces of their story together, I think that's a terrific example of how the places that you were have led to where you are. I know in higher ed, we spend a lot of time talking about access to opportunity. And I know you have a couple passions around making sure that we are serving underserved students, that rural students have access, and that we're addressing the digital divide. And I wondered if you could just spend a little bit of time talking about that, because I have a feeling that that is also shaping your priorities as you think about your job and the way you move in this community.
Yeah, there's no question. And the way you ask that question is a really great way, because I've had lots of board members and certainly lots of board chairs, but one of the board chairs that I had a few years ago, she was a wonderful person, a lawyer who was at the end of her career, and she used to say to me very politely and quietly, she'd say, you know, do you really think that you're bringing your greatest value to VCU if you're just solving problems, or if you're really focused on what you want to see happen with the institution? And of course, it's the latter. And so people, my passion is about the people who are at the center of this mission. It's students and it's patients. And candidly, whether it's the clinical or research aspects of our mission, you know, what matters the most is the extent to which what we're doing will advance the opportunities that we need to advance for our students or for our patients. We are, you know, a major urban public research university. And so, you know, my commitment from the day I got here was, you know, how do you provide access to students and give them the opportunity to engage and learn at a major research university, and to be engaged in deeper inquiry, and, you know, to be innovative and to be around innovative people and get excited about those ideas, and then think about, from an entrepreneurial perspective, how do you make that stuff happen? So ideas are part of it, but, you know, every good plan has to come with great implementation, or it just doesn't happen. And so the other piece of it that I'm motivated by is, you know, growing up in that small town, I was one of the few people in that town who was not white. And so I have to tell you that one thing that drew me to VCU was that we have a diverse student population, and I want everyone to be successful. So inclusion is a really, really critical value. And, you know, it should not just be an opportunity for people who have lots of money to go to major public research universities. It should be for everybody. That's how we lift this country, and that's how we bring everybody to the next level. And candidly, it's how we, 200 and some years later, really fulfill, you know, that whole dream that our founders, you know, had for this country, where, you know, it was your character and your work ethic and your commitment to doing good, and that hard work that would make it possible for you to succeed. And of course, Jeanne, you and I have had lots of conversations about the importance of understanding that you may need to be sure that your hard work is combined with the right skills, right? And that's why we talk so much about digital literacy, because it's so incredibly important. And so my focus really, Jeanne, to round this question off, or at least my answer off, is, you know, I'm committed to student success. I want our students to have the best, deepest, engaging experiences. And it's not always going to be in the classroom. And that's what I'm pushing my faculty colleagues to think about, is how do we get our students in environments where what we're teaching them makes more sense to them, becomes more exciting because it's real to them, right? And so for, you know, the younger you are, I think the more that your reality is presence and actually doing something with what you learn, so that you remember why you learned it and why it's important. And so the keys for me are really graduation on time. And for our patients, it's getting them in and out of the hospital and on the road to wellness, and not returning to the hospital, hopefully, if we've taken good care of them. And safety. Safety is critical. It's a critical part of what I constantly focus on in my vision and in my work every day, for both students and patients, but also our faculty, staff, and of course, all of our visitors and anyone else who is a part of VCU. We have 23,000 employees at VCU. It's a $5 billion organization. There's a lot of complexity here, and safety is a really critical part of what I do. So listen, I will tell you that one of the things associated with this question that comes to mind, Jeanne, is that the pandemic really brought to light aspects of the divide. And so when we had students who were writing to the president's office, and I saw all their notes that said back when we had to pivot really quickly to, electronic means, they said, can you please help me let my professor know that I can't turn my paper in electronically. I have to mail it because I don't have access to broadband. And so that's in Virginia, by the way. And so we knew we needed to use our influence to help advance electronic means by which to connect with folks. And so, it really showed us as well who could now attend. So in the fall, we put a lot online, which showed us who could attend VCU, who couldn't before because they were place bound. And now we've provided access through our electronic means online. So we've learned a lot, and everything we've learned is going to make us a stronger institution going forward. And I'm, really driven to be certain that VCU becomes more of a statewide resource and entity to everyone anywhere throughout Virginia, but really throughout the entire Mid-Atlantic region.
So this is lovely. There's a reason that you do have had a lot of public speaking for a living, because you've teed up the rest of our conversation perfectly. And namely, there's the threads that I want to pull on a little bit more that you raised. One is really this notion of regionalism. We're going to also talk about digital tech and the role of digital tech skills in the workforce moving forward. And then the third thing that I do want to make sure we cover is this consideration around an equitable outcome and making sure that we build a region where everyone can live, work, raise a family, build a business, earn a livable wage. And so those three threads you really were beginning to hit on, but I wonder if we could start with this concept of taking a regional perspective. Sure. And so you're based in Richmond, of course, but you are now, you always have had a national and global footprint, and I dare say pandemic, it's probably even greater. So how important is taking this regional perspective, given the Greater Washington Partnership and Capital CoLAB's lens, to the way you think about your role and how an institution functions in society?
Yeah, really great way to ask the question, because VCU is absolutely a major national research university. We're a public university, of course, and there are a lot of opportunities I think you have when you're a public university. You also have a lot of responsibility to ensure that, you have the access that I talked about earlier. And, one of the only ways to really advance that sense of being a major national resource is by taking a regional perspective. My read is that VCU had a lot of presence in Richmond, a lot of presence, and probably I would say a 30-mile radius in particular. But as I, reached out and really in my first few years, I spent a lot of time on the road and a lot of time in Northern Virginia, a lot of time in Hampton Roads, and certainly in many of our rural areas where we now, by the way, have some hospitals, and I'm proud of that we have added hospitals like in South Hill Community Memorial Hospital is a VCU hospital, and Tappahannock is the same. But what I learned is that a regional approach is going to be a whole lot more valuable to us and to everybody else in leveraging this institution, but also enhancing the institution and bringing greater diversity to the institution. But this regional perspective is critical because so many of them, our students now do not come from the Richmond region. They come from way beyond the Richmond region. We think that's good. It brings more diversity to Richmond. It also, by the way, has given us an opportunity. So when I came, we were retaining probably 33% or about a third of our graduates. Today, we retain more than half of them here in the area who stay to work. And by the way, with the improvement of our graduation rate, which was close to 48% when I came, is now pretty much 70%, and should be this graduation class. I realize that's 1,700 more who are part of that 50%. So it's been good for us. And most VCU graduates, 85% of them stay in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And we're a major supplier of talent. And for that reason, it's important for us to be connected throughout. One of the things that's a vision that I have as well Jeannie, is that I really want to see every VCU student do something other than classroom work before they get their degree. So I announced that in 2017, I believe, and it's now a requirement for all of our students. And if I had to pick sort of, a student asked me, well, what would you say you want us to do if you had to pick one thing? And I said, well, if you put me on the spot, I would tell you it's the internship. You know, it's going to work with somebody before you graduate and setting yourself up to slide in as an employee because you've test driven them, they've test driven you. It'll probably work out really well if you have a cultural match. And if it doesn't, then do another one, but do one early so you can do another one if you need to, or you know, really deepen your relationship. But I want students to become interns so that when they're graduates, they have a place to go and they have a story to talk about. You know, you're not just talking about, you know, engineering in the context of a textbook, but you're talking about why it matters and why what you learn matters and how you used it as an intern so that you have a story to tell about how you're going to make the world a better place with what you know. And so candidly, these economic powerhouses around our country and around the world, they are these larger regions. And so that's why Greater Washington Partnership is a vision that we are absolutely committed to and need to be a part of. And we want that network to become our students' network, to become our faculty members' network for their research collaborations. And we certainly want this to be a network for VCU, period, including our alumni. Listen, VCU is a 6 billion plus economic contributor statewide. And if you go outside of Virginia, it's even more than that. For every dollar that is invested in VCU, it's about $4 in return. I mean, that's really amazing if you think about it. So, you know, increasing the prominence of VCU out of state is something that we've needed to do for a really long time, because it is a major national institution. And for the sake of our alumni, we all, including our alumni, including our current students and our faculty, we all need to be really standing up taller and telling the VCU story farther and wider, because it's due and it's deserved. I mean, we're not a small research institution, 335 million a year. Our impact is tremendous. I will tell you that I can't tell you the total number, but it is thousands of lives that we save in a year at VCU. I mean, talk about impact, that's incredible. But think about the impact of 7,700 graduates coming out of this institution every year. And Jeannie, I know what you're waiting for me to say. If every one of them had a digital technology and literacy credential, wouldn't that be awesome for this region? And so and by the way, we move forward on the digital literacy technology credential because we were listening to employers in the region. And hopefully, again, that sort of greases the slide for our students to end up at these employers.
I think so. Let me say thank you. Thank you for the plug. Thank you also for sharing more about VCU and just the sheer numbers of students you're graduating. You're right. I'd like every single one of your 7,700 students who are graduating to have a digital tech credential. Absolutely. Here's the other piece though. It's still not going to be enough to meet employer demand for people with digital tech credentials in our region. And so what excites me about the CoLAB, and what I think is really gives us sort of the whole is greater than the sum of our parts, is that we have the opportunity to pull in resources from across our region. We have the most incredible higher education institutions. We have the most incredible employers, and we have the most incredible talent in the form of students that are across this region. So 85% of your students are staying in the Virginia Commonwealth. I'd like to take the other 15% and have them stay in DC and in Maryland. That would be my goal. We are really committed through the CoLAB to making sure we're building the most diverse digital tech workforce in this country. And what I anticipate is going to happen increasingly is that employers from this region are looking to us to source their diverse talent, and they're going to hire talent from here. And then these are national and multinational corporations. And so then they will move talent around, but we are going to be the site and the source of digital tech talent for the country. That's really my vision. And we need partners like VCU to be able to do it. We just can't do it without it. But these problems are complex, right? So it's not just if you know digital tech, you're fine. You have to also be able to get to your job. And so I know regional mobility is a passion of yours, and it's certainly a passion of ours at the Greater Washington Partnership. Wanted to give you an opportunity to just speak a little bit about it, and then wanted to share a little announcement coming from the GWP side.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited about the announcement, so I'll keep it short. You know, regional mobility is important, and for one, I mean, sort of in ether, your mobility as a student, as a graduate of VCU or any school in the Greater Washington region, with a digital literacy credential, which you can get at VCU. Anybody can do it at VCU, and we welcome everybody from VCU as one of the founders of this digital literacy credential. That'll give you great mobility. However, one of the reasons that I concluded that it was a challenge, and although we were 90 miles away from Washington, D.C., why weren't we more active and engaged in the Washington, D.C. area? And then I got on 95 a couple of times and realized exactly why. Because when 2 hours becomes 6 hours and you don't know what happened or why, and you miss the meeting that you were going all the way up there to be at anyway, and then you turned around in Fredericksburg or some crazy thing like that, I started to realize, okay, so now I'm starting to see why. I don't think anybody really anticipated how wonderful this area would be and how big our federal government would be and all of those things that we have become. So we've got to address this, and we can't address it unless we address it together. And mobility in the region is critical. And we've got to make it quick and easy for people to get back and forth between, I think, really any part of DC, but certainly Maryland and Virginia. Maryland and Virginia have so many great things about each of our states, and certainly the district as well. That we've just got to be able to get back and forth quickly. And just think about the richness of our relationships, the greater diversity opportunities that we have, and really the exchange of information, learning, and the ability to collaborate. When you take a talented person in DC with a talented person in Richmond, and you create this great new innovative company that you might not have created because they couldn't get together.
That's exactly right. And also for students who need those internships and other work-based learning opportunities, they need to be able to get there. So if you can't get to your internship, you're not going to be able to actually experience all of those amazing benefits from it. And that's really key. So I am really delighted to announce the Capital CoLab has partnered up with the Greater Washington Partnership's Regional Mobility Team. And we are launching a student competition. Hopefully all of you digital tech experts are going to help us do this. The partnership released a Capital Region Rail Vision. And so what this was a 25-year roadmap for how the Capital Region can transform its rail system so that people can actually move from one side of the region to the other and access all of those opportunities that are available and really just take advantage of this incredible region. So this competition, that roadmap has been created, but what we need to know now is how can we ensure that people are caring about this rail vision? And we're asking all of you with your digital tech backgrounds to engage in this student competition, to imagine how we can communicate about this rail vision, what the impacts of this strategy will be over the next 25 years, what will be different because of this. And there's lots of different lenses you can take. You can think about it from economic benefits. You can think about it from equity benefits. You can think about it from family benefits and community benefits. So it's a cash prize. So first place will be $750. Second place is $500. Third place is $250. I think my colleagues are going to drop a link to this in the chat so that you can access it, and we will definitely make sure we email all of you about it ahead of time. But students who are watching this webinar, you guys are perfect to participate in this competition. There will be a Q&A webinar on June 3rd. And we hope you'll join us for that. And then submissions will be at the end of June. So you have some time to get your ideas together. But just know that we value your expertise. And this also connects to the idea of being able to apply your learning, having those products that you can use to communicate to future employers what you've done. We think this competition really is just an exciting opportunity, one, for you all to help lead our region in how we're doing this work, and also to apply your digital tech skills and move us forward. So
Cool.
I'm going to go ahead, President Rao.
Yeah. Now, I was
We're
just
so
going to say,
excited.
hooray, this is awesome. Great announcement. If we were in a room, I think people would be like clapping and cheering. So
I know it's so soul sucking to just talk to like dead air, but I'm grateful for your feedback on this one because we are very excited about it.
I am too.
So, well, thank you for that. We did have a question from the audience, and it's an anonymous attendee, so could be from anywhere.
Okay.
But I think it's a great question, and I'll be curious to hear how you answer it. As a university president, what is one complex problem that you continue to grapple with? And let's see if you can narrow it to one.
Yeah, I mean, that is a hard question to answer because there are so many complex problems. You know, I would say, honestly, I'll be straightforward. It's the bridging of this huge gap between the ways in which many people have seen the world and the ways in which people who are on their way into the professions see the world. Some of that is because the population of younger people is so much more diverse, and they have had very different experiences with a very different time. Technology has had a lot to do with that. You know, a good example is, you know, just look at the number of students who really want to be back in the classroom, and then look at the number of faculty and staff, whether it's K-12 or any place, who are not as sure that they want to be back in the classroom, right? And so why are those differences what they are? And my job, of course, is to really focus on the mission and to try to get people to recognize that we have an obligation to meet students where they are, right? And we have to meet patients where they are. You know, patients are tired of waiting. Patients are tired of, you know, students are tired of waiting. You know, why don't you use more technology so that I can, you know, just do what I need to do without having to wait in any line? Yeah, you know, so it's that's the challenge I face, and really trying to keep everyone calm when they see the world so differently is definitely a challenge. But, you know, the vast majority of people, like literally, I think it's 99.99% of people, you know, are committed to figuring out how we can live together with our differences, no matter what they are. And then you have the small but very, very loud number of people who, you know, want everything to go their way. And the bottom line is society is, if the pandemic has done anything, it's taught us that, you know, this is an experience in how well can you do all of this together, right? And so you might have your own political views, you might have whatever, your own desires and problems or interests, but, you know, how does that fit into society more generally? So that's the really big challenge that I navigate all the time. And in the midst of that are a lot of people's emotions. And my desire, you know, I'm one who historically has wanted to make everybody happy. I have learned that I cannot do that. I can't make everybody happy, but I can do what's right. And that's what I really am trying to do more of. And so there is this place in the middle that, you know, is generally going to be in everyone's best interest when you focus on fundamental principles like, you know, safety, experience, and candidly, timely outcomes. Those are the things that really matter. So anyway, but that's the real challenge, is that generational gap. And, you know, how do you bring people together when they see the world so differently? Their values are very different, and candidly, their interests are different. And how do you make people candidly less self-oriented and a little more flexibly geared toward what other people need?
And that certainly, that feels like for all of us who work in this space of trying to align higher education and workforce, that is sort of the million-dollar question, is how do we improve the signaling that is happening from employers to students and universities? How do we make sure those opportunities are in their path? We have a great question from an audience member. But the frame that he asked is really long, and so I might shorten it a little bit. So he said, when we look toward the future, 10 and even 20 years down the line, key technologies such as machine learning, digital wallets, automation, I don't even know how to say this, CRISPR, Cas9, what, I don't know what that's, guys, trust me, I run a digital tech organization. 3D printing are emerging at such a rate at which they're going to change profoundly the world and the way we engage. I think that's right. The question is, how do you leverage these technologies to build the future? But I think, could we put a tighter frame on it? So we have students who are graduating or going to be graduating within the next 5 years. So can I ask you to tweak the question a little bit and reflect on the future of work, and just, yes, there's generational differences in people and working, but what are we going to see in terms of our shifts? And what can students expect over the next 5 years if you were to give them guidance in terms of how to navigate this world because of the rapid nature of digital tech?
Sure, absolutely. So I think the future of work is really going to be all about the extent to which we address some of the things that I just talked about. How do you ensure equality with regard to access? How do you ensure that you have inclusion when you have diversity? You don't want people coming and going. You want people to be a part of your organization for at least some period of time. Although, we hear that stat about how people will change jobs and maybe organizations 5 to 7, what is it now, 10 times or something like that in the courses of their careers. And I understand that, but I do think that continuity will continue to have some value. And so tolerating other people. And, my advice to all students is, don't just tolerate other people with differences, embrace them. And try to understand more about people who are different, and try to embrace those differences so that you then can view that as your opportunity to learn how to serve diverse clients better, if you will, or whatever. I think all businesses are going to have to really be thoughtful about public health. It's a reality right now. There's no question that public health is going to be, I'll say, mind, body, and spirit. So here we focus a ton on the body, and we have saved a lot of lives physically. But we all need to be doing a whole lot more to address people's emotional well-being and mental health generally. It is a much, much bigger matter than anybody realizes. So, one of the things that we've tried to do is, candidly find ways to reach out to students. We've got to do a lot of it through my faculty colleagues, some of whom are more attuned to looking at how well students are doing or how well they're not doing, and giving us a heads up so that we can reach out to students if things don't look like they're going well, because counseling can be enormously valuable and helpful, particularly from a counselor who has, who shares a lot of the a perspective and understanding of what somebody's issues might be. I think we're going to have to look forward post-pandemic at maybe more work from home and what that looks like. Some that will be great for, and many that will not be great for. I think there are a lot of people itching to just get right back to environments where they can thrive on each other's energies and, push innovation and even entrepreneurship forward with those energies. I think we're going to have to pay a whole lot more attention to childcare. And remember, if you're not supportive of those kinds of things because you figure, oh, well, I don't have to worry, I don't have any kids, you might one day. And the bottom line is they're all our children. And so you want to be concerned about all children. I think we've got to be thinking about affordable housing. If we've learned anything in the course of the last year, the pandemic disproportionately hit hard people who have historically been underrepresented and who have been at a disadvantage. We're going to have to think about housing and how to make affordable housing an opportunity for many people to take the next step in their lives. My son and I, in his high school years, we spent a lot of time doing volunteer work in an organization that was for homeless men. I mean, he learned a lot. I had known a little bit more about this because I had started my career doing some work with homeless guys in a detox. But he learned a lot about it. And he said, you know, Dad, it's a hole. You know, once you're in that homeless hole, it's really difficult to get out of it. And what this organization has done is just incredible. It's called Caritas. They have taken these guys and given them a chance to really be successful. And we need to do more of that, because when everyone's successful, we are successful. If everyone's not successful, we're not that successful. And you'll know that, you know, when you get to be older, because you look back and say, were there people's lives who I could have lifted? And the answer is probably yes. The other is affordable education. Education cannot be this elite thing that is accessible only to people who have a lot of money. It just isn't going to work. And so we're going to have to be thinking a lot about that. And so I think the other thing I'd tell you is I'm nervous about what I see in our country in terms of work-life balance. I think people are getting lost in work again. I know I am. It's just not stopping. I mean, I think because of the pandemic partly, but just my personality, you know, and my family tells me, you know, Dad, listen, it's Saturday night. You really just need to shut that off. Right. And we can tell you're thinking about this, that, and the other, and it's time to think about us. And they're right, especially after me being a president for 27 years now. I should probably be doing something.
Well, but what you speak to is, I think, in my most optimistic moments, I see a trend where we are all a little more willing to give a little to get a little. And so the nature of like, I've worked in this space between higher education and employers for a long time, and it's fundamentally changing. I think employers are much more willing to sort of step in carefully and respectfully and engage in the academic exercise that is necessary, right? And I see that universities are inviting employers in. I see that, I hope in my most optimistic moments that we are, as you said, we're seeing some of the patterns that are emerging. I mean, certainly as we look at what's happened in this country around systemic racism over the past 14, 15 months, where we've all sort of, many people were already awakened to it, but where I think as a crescendo has emerged, right? And it's not going away.
Awareness, but there's also a lot of opposition. And I think it's loud opposition, but I think most people in their heart want to see what's best for all human beings. And we need to go with that and not be living in fear of that. Jeannie, could I just mention one quick thing to go back to? Yep. You know, the emotional well-being of people is critical. I will tell you, I'm not political. I'm not at all Republican or Democrat or liberal or conservative, but I am VCU, and I will tell you that I firmly believe that one of the things that will be important for us going forward is to bring more students back together so that we can be more in check with their social and emotional well-being. So we need to be doing more of that. So if you wonder, what are we doing? One of the things I'm doing is I'm pushing pretty hard against, in some cases, and pretty strong waves against the idea of getting students back together. And listen, you know, we're also going to do plenty online for students for whom that's a better deal and it works better and they're more accessible because they're doing an internship or because they're in Southwest Virginia. Or because they can't come out of, they've got something going on in DC and can't come to VCU. There'll be plenty of that. I'm not too worried about that. But for a lot of students, we can't have them just sitting in Richmond in a dorm looking at a computer screen forever, right? We need to give them an opportunity to be together in classrooms and to learn from each other and to learn from their mentors, their faculty members. And so the reality for a lot of people is that presence matters, right? And so, and candidly, it gives us a way of checking with each other. Somebody who was real bubbly at the front end of a semester suddenly has nothing to say at all. You know, in the middle of the semester, as a fellow student, you might reach out and say, hey, how's it going? You know, could you have coffee? And, you know, and connect them with resources to help them. But they have a lot of
we hear that from employers too, right? That, I mean, and there's a diversity of opinions and sort of strategies for employers on going back to work, but we hear the same thing, that they want to be together for the exact same reasons.
Right.
For the ability to care for each other and to collaborate and create and all of those. We have, we're really at time, but if you have 2 minutes,
Sure.
I thought maybe we could do just a quick rapid fire on some of the Q&A that came in, because these are great questions. So like 30-second answers for each.
I get it.
Okay. So
my answers were too long. I get it.
Oh, I loved your answers. I have all night. We can be here all night long. We'll see how long everyone sticks with us. So the first question is, what major changes or trends do you see taking place in the greater Washington region over the next 25 years?
Lots. I mean, I do think that we will become much more digitally competent, all of us. I think that we will be more technology savvy. And I see tremendous opportunities to leverage a lot of the businesses that might have been dependent on, you know, agencies like the DoD, Department of Defense, that will bring people together and create great new things. And so what I experienced when I was in California and Silicon Valley in the 90s, I think we're going to see a lot of that here in the greater Washington area. And I want to pull that down into the Richmond region as well. But I do think that there's going to be a heavy healthcare component to it. I think you're going to see a lot of healthcare innovation in our region. I'm really excited about that. I think we will become a destination for patients who have rare diseases, rare conditions, and can't go anyplace else because they need a clinical trial. I think it's going to happen right here.
Excellent. And what do you foresee universities doing differently in a post-COVID world? So in a slightly different vein.
I think a lot of differences have to be made. The bottom line is we are going to have to meet students where they are. We're going to have to pay more attention to how they want to learn, how they learn best. We cannot do everything the way it was done at Oxford and Cambridge 1,000 years ago forever. We have got to pay more attention to, again, with a commitment to real inclusion, meaning the inclusion of all human beings. We've got to pay more attention to how everybody learns, not just how the people who did really well with, you know, certain kinds of courses sitting in a classroom in single file did, but, you know, how do more people learn in studios, in clinics, in laboratories, on the street, doing internships in schools, doing internships in companies. You know, that's how a lot more people are going to be learning. And I think that's what more of what we're going to have to do. The other thing is stimulating students more with our own research so that they see why we do the research that we do, so that they understand why it matters and become motivated to do better when they are in the classroom.
Beautiful. I think that's terrific. And so one last comment. I really love the optimism that has been a thread throughout all of this. And so I know we have plenty of challenges to address together, but there's also, I think throughout this, we've heard from you a narrative about staying true to yourself, remembering your values, remembering your community, making sure that what you're doing is important and matters, and asking yourself those questions kind of regularly throughout the process, and trusting your village around you to help drive that, which I think has been, it's amazing to hear that from you. Yeah. If you had a last piece of advice to get all of these students who are listening are about to go slay the workforce, enter the world, be beasts and take over and do great work and really help build this future that we want to see, what's the last piece of advice or guidance that you would give to them?
Jeannie, it applies to a workplace environment. It applies to workforce generally. It applies to everything. How can you be a leader in helping us to move society together forward in any direction, respecting all of the differences and different views that might be out there? How do you pull us forward for the betterment of the human experience, period? And that's going to take a lot of thought, but it is going to take a lot of give, but also you'll get to take, because in the grand scheme of things, what does matter is how have I spent my time? And I wouldn't waste much of your time on things that don't matter. I wouldn't waste much of your time on the things, candidly, that are destructive or inhumane or going to make you or anybody else unhappy. Because if you could look back when you were 90 years old and say, should I have wasted my time doing those things that I got my way, but the bottom line is it didn't matter? No, you'll wish that you had done more to bring people together and lift us all up as high as you could possibly lift us all. The human experience is your experience. Your time is clicking and going by now. Preserve every minute of it, because time is your most valuable resource in what we call the human experience, our lives.
President Rao, thank you. I couldn't imagine a better way to finish up our Credential Month series of events. I hope the students have gotten as much from this as I have, because this has been really delightful. So I thank you for your time. For those of you on the line still, all of the recordings from prior events are available on the Credential Month website. We'll make sure that we send that link to you, but also this one. So when you need a motivational speech, when you're feeling discouraged by something, you can come listen to those last words from President Rao on repeat, because I think that advice is really just stunning in its simplicity, actually, and as a co-host. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure.
Have a wonderful evening and go enjoy your family. Bye-bye, everyone.